Rio Chalquatlan tragedy. On March 9, 2003, a group of tourists arrived at Guta del Rio Chalquatlan in Guerrero, Mexico. Led by local guides who knew the cave system through experience, not training, the cave's entrance was no easy welcome. A steep, jagged canyon dropping into pitch-black darkness, where every step on loose rock was a gamble. Among them was Maria Santos, a young woman on vacation, chasing excitement. The group began their descent, spreading out casually along the crumbling slope. It was a deadly mistake. On unstable terrain, climbers must stay vertically spaced. One person above another means that a single dislodged rock can become a deadly missile. Maria was halfway down, gripping the rough stone, focused on her footing. Above her, another tourist shifted, dislodging a small limestone boulder. It wasn't heavy, just a few pounds, but gravity turned it into a missile, the rock gaining speed. In the dim light, Maria never saw it coming. The stone struck her head with brutal force like a sledgehammer. Her hands slipped and she fell. Her body tumbled down the canyon, crashing against sharp rocks. Each hit worsened her injuries. The group watched, helpless, as she vanished into the darkness below. The guides froze, stunned. They'd seen accidents, but nothing like this. The tourists panicked, some wanting to rush down, but the guides stopped them. The slope was too unstable. Another step could trigger more falling rocks. They had no choice but to wait. Hours later, rescuers reached Maria. The blow to her head was catastrophic. She likely died on impact. The fall only sealed her fate. Recovering her body was a slow, dangerous task. Rescuers used ropes and anchors, carefully navigating the unstable canyon to avoid another collapse. They secured Maria to a stretcher and hauled her up the treacherous path. Driebelbis Cave Incident. On October 1, 1983, 6 friends were exploring Driebelbis Cave near Kutztown, Pennsylvania. They were all experienced in cave exploring. It was supposed to be a normal trip. Go in, look around, and come back out by morning. For hours, the group navigated the underground passages. They made their way deeper into the cave. Everything proceeded normally until the early morning hours, when the group decided it was time to head back to the surface. They began their exit around 2 a.m. Robert Scott was 36 years old. He had done this many times before. The exit was just 75 feet away. That night, he was the third person in line as they started heading back to the surface. 2 had already made their way successfully, but to get out, they had to pass through a long, narrow crack stretching about 80 feet high. The crack was tight, just 12 inches wide in most places. In one part, it got even tighter. Before opening up again below, it narrowed to just 7 or 8 inches. Robert started to climb down through the crack. It was slippery from mud and water. As he moved, his hand slipped. He lost his balance and fell. Not far, but just enough to get stuck. He landed sideways in the tightest part of the crack. His body was twisted. He couldn't move. He couldn't go up or down. He was trapped. The rock walls pressed against his body from both sides. His friends tried to pull him out, but nothing worked. Every surface around him was rounded and slick with mud. There was nothing to hold on to. After 7 hours of trying, they knew they needed help. Rescuers arrived fast. They brought ropes, slings, heaters, and tools. Everyone worked together. They talked to Robert and kept him calm, but things started to get worse. At first, Robert was talking. Then, he started yelling. He was angry. He cursed at the rescuers. He thrashed around when they tried to move him. His body was stuck, and his mind was starting to shut down. He was epileptic. Twice during the rescue attempt, he was given medication to prevent seizures. However, this treatment did nothing to improve his mental state or cooperative behavior. Still, rescuers tried everything. They blew warm air into his suit. They gave him soup, coffee, even donuts. They put plastic and grease on the rock to make it slippery. They tried to lift him with inflatable bags, but nothing worked. He was stuck too tight, and now he was fighting against them. By Monday morning, Robert had been trapped for more than 30 hours. His body was cold. His energy was gone. His heart was failing. Around 7 a.m., he screamed again and thrashed wildly. Then everything went quiet. Rescuers checked him. No breathing, no pulse. They didn't give up. They gave him oxygen, warmed his body, injected fluids. Still nothing. Now unconscious, the team made a final decision. They had to get him out no matter what. They wrapped ropes around his body and pulled hard. His chest scraped against the rock. His shoulders were crushed against the walls. If he had been awake, the pain would have been unbearable. Finally, at 12:25 p.m., they pulled him free. They carried him to the surface, still hoping for a miracle. But Robert Scott was already gone. He died from heart failure caused by shock, cold, and exhaustion. Temple of Doom tragedy. On August 17, 1997, 5 tourists were excited for a diving trip in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. 3 Americans, Rebecca and Mark Williams, and Joy Johnson, and 2 Canadians, Thomas and Lisa Chen, wanted to explore the cenotes near Tulum. Their guide, Eduardo Mendez, a 28-year-old diving instructor, packed the van with gear and led the group. Eduardo had 3 years of experience diving in Cozumel's open waters but knew little about cave diving. The tourists were new divers with no cave experience. They had single air tanks and basic lights, not enough for dangerous caves. By early afternoon, they arrived at Cenote Temple of Doom, a dark, 10-foot-wide hole in the jungle. A wooden ladder went down 16 feet to the water. Joy, feeling tired, stayed out of this dive. Rebecca, Mark, Thomas, and Lisa got ready to go in. The group climbed down and entered the water. The cenote was small, with limestone walls and tree roots hanging down. Almost no sunlight reached inside, making it feel spooky but exciting. For 20 minutes, they explored the cavern area, where some light from the entrance was still visible. Then, Eduardo made a bad decision. He led them past 2 warning signs, one showing a diver with a red slash, the other saying, "Stop! Prevent your death! Go no further!" He didn't stop, and the group, trusting him, followed. They entered the Madonna Passage, a tight tunnel only 5 feet wide and 6.5 feet high. A thin rope, their only guide, led into the dark. After 10 minutes, they were 394 feet from the entrance. Their air tanks were running low because of the depth and stress. Thomas tapped his air gauge, showing it was almost empty. Eduardo realized the danger and signaled to turn back. Turning around in the narrow tunnel was hard. Their fins stirred up silt from the cave floor, making the water cloudy. They could barely see. Rebecca and Mark lost the rope and swam the wrong way, deeper into the cave. Thomas and Lisa, also lost, went in another direction. When Eduardo reached the cavern zone, he realized only he had emerged from the passage, his tank nearly empty. He surfaced, told Joy what happened, and took her full tank. He dove back in. At 295 feet, he found Lisa, who wasn't breathing from her regulator, sharing Thomas's backup air. Eduardo gave her his air and led them out. In the cavern, Eduardo sent them to the surface and went back for Rebecca and Mark. At 50 feet in, he found Rebecca, unconscious, with no air left. He brought her up. Eduardo dove again and found Mark Williams. Mark was floating motionless with an empty tank. He was dead. Rebecca was taken to a hospital in Tulum, but died that evening from drowning and lack of oxygen. Fault Cave Incident. On March 21, 1996, 3 friends, Randy, Sam, and Eric, headed for an adventure in Fault Cave near Denver. For Eric, it was his first time caving, and his excitement lit up the group. The cave was known for its tricky passages, especially a tight slot called the Crack of Doom. Armed with just torches and basic gear, they weren't ready for the dangers ahead. Randy had some caving experience, but Eric was a total beginner. They hiked through thick forest to the cave's entrance. Inside, they squeezed through jagged rocks and narrow tunnels. The deeper they went, the tighter the passages got. But Eric pushed on, caught up in the thrill. Then, they hit the Crack of Doom, a narrow gap that demanded care. Eric tried to slip through, but he slid into a head-down position. Each wiggle wedged him deeper into the rock. The walls pressed hard against his chest and head, making every breath a struggle. Panic set in as he felt trapped, the weight of the cave bearing down. Randy and Sam tugged at Eric, desperate to free him, but his awkward, head-down angle made it impossible. Randy scrambled out of the cave to call for help. He reached local caver Jim Neely, who quickly gathered a rescue team. Eric had been stuck for hours, growing weak in the cold, damp cave. Hypothermia was a real danger, and his position made things worse. The rescue team arrived. They studied the Crack of Doom and saw drilling could send debris onto Eric's head. Instead, they chose a safer plan. They removed Eric's clothes to reduce friction against the rocks. Then, they slathered his body with Vaseline to help him slide free. The team worked quietly, knowing time was short. The cave's chilly air threatened Eric's strength. As they spread the Vaseline, his body started to shift slightly, giving them hope. They kept going, coating every inch carefully. Finally, with one last push, the team slid Eric free from the Crack of Doom. His body was scraped and bruised, but he was alive. Womer Cave Incident. On March 29, 2003, the York Grotto Cave explorers gathered at Womer Cave in Pennsylvania for a planned caving trip. Mark Engel, the organizer, split the group into 2 teams to explore different parts of the cave. Kevin Dunleavy, a 41-year-old seasoned cave explorer, led the second group deeper into the limestone tunnels. They had helmets, backup lights, and solid experience. The team reached a junction where a narrow passage led to the shoemaker room. A spot Dunleavy had never seen but heard was a quick 10 to 20-minute detour. 3 team members, tired from the day's crawl, stayed behind with the group's packs. Dunleavy and 3 others, eager for the adventure, left the packs and squeezed into the tight passage. The tunnel grew smaller fast. They crouched, then crawled as the walls closed in. Loose stones and jagged rocks made the path tricky, but the promise of the shoemaker room kept them moving. They hit an 18-inch crawl space, barely high enough to slide through on their bellies. Above, loose rocks formed a shaky ceiling. Dunleavy removed his helmet to fit through the crawl. When they emerged, disappointment hit hard. The passage ended at a blank wall. No shoemaker room, no grand chamber, just a dead end. They'd risked their lives for nothing. Now they faced the same dangerous crawl back, only in reverse, which was even harder. As Dunleavy led the way back, he saw the breakdown above the crawl clearly for the first time. Fear gripped him, but there was no choice. They had to move. Halfway through, disaster struck. A 50-pound rock, shaken by his crawling, slid with a grinding roar and crashed onto Dunleavy's legs, pinning him in the 18-inch space. He couldn't move, trapped on his back with the boulder crushing him. Behind him, the three others were stuck in the dead-end passage, cut off by Dunleavy's trapped body. They tried pushing the rock, but it was wedged tight. Their tools, hammers, webbing, everything, sat useless in the packs at the junction. Dunleavy shouted to the three at the junction. Two ran to find Mark Engel's group, while Sky Fisher stayed, helpless with the crawl blocked. Dunleavy's pain grew unbearable, and the shifting rocks above threatened more collapse. He knew if he couldn't get free, the others were trapped too. After 30 agonizing minutes, one of the trapped cavers remembered a small rope in his personal pack. Fisher reached through a crack to grab it. It wasn't much, but it was a lifeline. They worked in the tight space, carefully wrapping the rope around the boulder to create leverage. Every move was precise. Too much force could bring down more rocks. With slow, steady pulls, they lifted the rock just enough. Dunleavy slid his crushed legs free and scrambled out. The others followed fast, desperate to escape the unstable crawl. They reached the junction, shaken but alive, as Mark Engel's group arrived. Ice Rink Cave Rescue. On May 25, 2003, Chris Molyneux, a 36-year-old cave explorer, planned a cave trip with his family to Ice Rink Cave in Washington. He had been inside caves before, but this time, he wanted to take his wife and kids with himself. They packed up and drove to the mountains. Chris brought his wife Michelle and their 3 young children. He parked their car about 200 yards from the cave entrance. Soon, they found a dark hole in the ground. Chris looked at it. He wasn't sure if this was the real entrance to Ice Rink Cave. To be safe, he decided to go in alone first. The cave got tighter and darker as he walked in. After about 100 feet, he found a small crawlway. It was only 18 inches high. Chris turned on his headlamp and checked his map. He believed this crawlway would lead to the main chamber of the cave. He got on his hands and knees and crawled through the tight space. On the other side, he stood up and found himself in a bigger tunnel. He started walking, but something felt wrong. He walked for a long time and still didn't find the main chamber. Then, he came across some fallen rocks. These rocks weren't shown on his map. He climbed over them and kept walking. Still, there was no sign of the main part of the cave. So Chris decided to turn back. He walked back the same way he came. Then, he found what looked like the crawlway, but it was blocked with dirt and rocks. He tried going the other way, but after walking a long distance, he found another blocked area, and it looked exactly the same. Chris was confused. There was only supposed to be one crawlway, not two. To test something, he drew a big X in the dirt with his finger. Then he walked the other way and counted his steps. After 400 steps, he saw the same X in the dirt. That's when he realized the cave was a loop. He was walking in circles. There was no way out. Chris started to panic. He had already been underground for over an hour. He tried to stay calm. He tore small pieces of his map and left them at different places to keep track of where he had been. Time passed slowly. After 5 hours of walking in circles, Chris was exhausted. He was thirsty. He couldn't think straight. He sat down and started to cry. He thought about his family. His wife and kids were waiting outside. That gave him the strength to keep going. He stood up and walked back to the blocked entrance again. This time, he stayed close to the wall and looked carefully at every inch. And finally, he saw it. Just 50 feet from the blocked entrance, behind a rock, was a small crawlway. It was the way out. He had passed it many times, but it was hard to see. Chris dropped to the ground and crawled through the opening as fast as he could. A few minutes later, he saw light. He was outside. He had been trapped in the cave for 6 hours. When Chris got out, his family wasn't there. They had left to get help. Later, he found out that Michelle had walked all the way back to the road with the kids and found someone to drive them to a ranger station. She returned with rescuers just as Chris was walking out of the cave. After this, the cave got a new name. It's now called Minotaur Cave because of the strange loop inside. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. And drop your ideas for future videos in the comments below. Your suggestion might be the topic of the next upload.